Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today I'm sharing a great discussion that I had with Ben Brown. Ben Brown is the founder of Body Systems, which is a global health and nutrition coaching company known for its revolutionary Prime Fit OS system, which has helped clients shed over 15,000 pounds and transform their lives. With more than 2 decades of experience, Ben has worked with Fortune 500 executives, professional athletes, and teams like the Golden State Warriors, Arizona Diamondbacks, and Arizona Cardinals, as well as countless driven individuals seeking sustainable health solutions. He's armed with a dual master's degree in exercise and wellness and clinical nutrition. And Ben's coaching programs combine the science of real-world data, the psychology of behavior change, and the art of coaching to create lasting results. As a husband and father of 3, Ben draws on his personal and professional experiences to empower others to reclaim their energy, confidence, and health freedom, all without the burden of restrictive diets or unsustainable habit change. Ben, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd love for you to start by just sharing with us what inspired you to pursue your career in nutrition and fitness coaching.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And again, appreciate you having me on. It really was a product of, as a lot of us health practitioners, a product of really kind of figuring out my own health issues that led me into developing the skills and the tools to help other people with theirs. And so for me, it was a lot of kind of chronic gastrointestinal issues growing up by virtue of what I realized later was kind of being on antibiotics from the time I was an infant, kind of throughout my adolescence, and having it completely degraded my gut health. And that led to a myriad of issues, digestive issues and some kind of chronic bacterial infections. And so my whole journey was kind of really working backwards to figure out my own stuff when conventional medicine couldn't. Mm-hmm. And through graduate school, through nutritional studies, through a second master's degree in clinical nutrition, my first one was in exercise and wellness, and then functional medicine, and all the way just trying to unravel or, peel back the layers of the onion to only realize, and this is part of why our company is called Body Systems, just how integrated everything is, right? Everything works together and has so much synergy and symbiosis to the degree that while I was initially very interested in kind of health and fitness, as I started working with more and more clients, I started to realize the impact that nutrition, supplementation, lifestyle, stress management, all of those things play in our overall health.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you mind sharing why you were on so many antibiotics? Was like ear infections or upper respiratory?
Yeah. So, well, I think one thing was my parents are of the generation, the baby boomer generation, where it's just kind of like whatever the doctor says goes, and sort of this blind faith. And, listen, they were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. So, but just from, I had kind of chronic ear infections, and then anytime I would get sick, it was, well, let's go to the doctor. And, we know the prevalence of antibiotic overprescription, certainly 20, 30 years ago plus. I mean, I'm 45 now. And while antibiotics are a great thing, right, we also understand the scope of antibiotic resistance now. And so I think that was something that significantly contributed to, again, just gut degradation, a lot of food sensitivities, leaky gut. I ended up with H. pylori, which wreaked havoc on my stomach. And that I didn't figure out until, I think that's something that I struggled with for a solid like 12 or 15 years until I kind of really figured things out, and then used nutrition and supplementation to heal my gut.
Yeah. And that H. pylori comes back, man. I've had that myself, and it takes effort to keep that at bay.
Yeah. And what's cool about when you really take ownership over your nutrition and lifestyle behaviors is you develop the tools to be intuitive about how you're feeling and how food's impacting you. And, when nutrition starts to get a little too loosey-goosey, how it's impacting your health and how you feel, and your energy levels and your sleep quality and maybe your gut health. And so then you are kind of equipped with the skills to tighten things back up and kind of get back in line with what you know your body needs.
Yeah, for a lot of our clients at PhD, I think they don't understand how bad they feel until they start to make some of those changes. And once you start making those changes, like you said, you're more in tune and you can feel like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be having this heartburn right now. Something's
Right.
off, right? But whereas before we drop into this journey, we might feel like crap all the time, have
Yeah.
heartburn, headaches. So it's hard to listen to the body until you start to make some changes.
Yeah, it's really remarkable too, because you don't realize how bad you feel and you don't realize how good you could feel. And then
Yeah.
as you perpetually start to feel better and better, you realize how some seemingly innocuous foods
Mm-hmm.
can make you feel so terrible, which further reinforces, like your intrinsic motivation to just want to keep eating healthier and healthier or limiting alcohol intake. And I think
Yeah.
alcohol is like a great example for people. It's the more they exclude it, that whenever they do include it, um, fortunately and unfortunately, depending on the person, it ends up really working a number on them in terms of sleep and energy and blood sugar, and right to the degree that you're like, why do I keep doing this to myself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have that experience with alcohol. If I drink, man, I just can't handle it anymore. It like makes my brain on fire. But that can be a challenge for people dropping into a health journey. They don't want to give it up at the beginning.
I agree with you completely. Like I constantly, and over the years, it's progressively gotten less and less and less because of this conversation and what we're talking about. But I constantly rationalize it. And it's very like, I can have a glass of wine or two on a weekend. We're out to dinner and then sleep like crap, wake up feeling like crap. And it just creates this vicious cycle. And I'm like, why do I keep doing this to myself?
Why do we?
I don't
What's the
know.
answer?
Because
Insanity.
we're humans and we
Yeah.
rationalize a lot of things that aren't good for us.
Yeah. Well, what would you say are the biggest challenges you've found with your clients who are trying to drop weight and get healthy?
Consistency is, I think, the number one challenge for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my belief and certainly observation that a lot of what we believe we need to do is relegated to, and it's not wrong, is a lot of what we talk about is like we talk about calories, we talk about food choices, we talk about some overt levels of what we need to restrict. And I think as humans, it's human nature for us to kind of want to have almost like the easiest route possible, or like the easy button, or just the magic bullet. Like, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. But the reality is we don't factor in what real life actually looks like, right? The kids, the work, the stressors, just the lifestyle changes, the travel. And these are all of the things that get in the way of us doing the things that we quote unquote know that we're supposed to be doing, right? To the degree that it's just, it ends up wreaking havoc with our ability to be consistent. And so I think what we often do is we overcommit to the things that we think we need to do. We potentially overcommit to trying to be too aggressive and too restrictive with our nutrition and exercise, which ends up being unsustainable for us. So then we end up kind of quote unquote falling off the wagon, only to end up repeating that vicious cycle over and over and over again. And so I think it's our responsibility as a health practitioner to help reframe this mindset for people. And what we often talked about is changing the belief system around what it means to be healthy, or creating a new belief system, right? To the degree that it's, let's learn how to set some realistic expectations so you can be consistent, and then we can ultimately create long-term results.
Can you give some examples of what that would look like and how you keep people motivated for the long term? Because I think that's another thing. I mean, it comes back to consistency, but even with that, even if people have been consistent for 6 months on some habit behavior, it's so easy to fall back. How do you help people overcome that?
Yeah. So initially, and it's a good point. I mean, it's double-sided in that one, relying on motivation is in and of itself problematic, right? And instead we need to like infuse habits and behaviors here and develop this level of intrinsic motivation to the degree that we want to continue to reinforce these patterns. It's like we were talking about before. I feel better when I'm eating healthier foods and exercising more to the degree that I want to continue to feel good. And the way that we kind of help clients set themselves up for success, like I said, is certainly setting realistic expectations. And I think that is really important in the beginning. I know that's really important in the beginning. And a couple of the things that we do with our coaching is try and provide and create as much autonomy for our clients as possible, because as humans, and with the psychology of behavior change, we know that we need to be in a position to make decisions that are right for us. We need to have options. And frankly, any time that you tell someone, and I think the good example is, using our kids as examples, anytime you tell your kids what to do, invariably there's probably going to be a little bit of a pushback, as opposed to giving them autonomy to make decisions. Now, we can certainly guide them and give them choices that are both in their favor and in our favor too, but that's the idea. And so for our clients, it's really helping them create as much awareness as possible around their existing nutrition and exercise behaviors. Because once we know, right, once we know what our behaviors look like, then we're in a much better position to make an executive decision around, well, this is helping me, this is hurting me, here's where I can clearly see. And of course, we guide them with these decisions, but here's where I can clearly see where my handful of, peanut-filled pretzels are adding up to an extra 600 calories a day, or my couple glasses of wine, or my weekend behaviors versus my weekday behaviors versus just my snacking in between meals, or my lack of protein intake, right? As well as I do, there's so many different areas that we can work on. But the beauty is, once I know, then I can decide as a client what makes the most sense and perhaps feels like it's the least, I feel the least resistance towards changing. And so then I'm making executive decisions, and I'm empowered to make decisions for myself, which helps me at the end of the day control my calorie intake, start to see changes on the scale and with body composition, which makes me more motivated to want to keep on making those changes. And I think that's a very big part of the process, experiencing those early wins, creating as much awareness as possible, and then starting to build that intrinsic motivation to want to continue to make changes because it's associated with feeling good, looking good, and making the other changes in your life.
Yeah, that is a big part, I think, of having someone you are accountable to, just holding you to that consistency, and then having someone help you actually achieve good results so that you stay motivated to stay on track. If you're not, let's say weight loss is your goal and you're not dropping weight on your own, it's going to be really hard to maintain those habits because it's just not worth anything. There's no value there. But if you can see consistent weight loss, then you're more motivated to continue with those habits.
The beautiful thing, and you said it with accountability, is, and frankly, just having a coach who can shine light on those blind spots that you might not be seeing, because it's not as simple. And I'm sure your listeners have heard this from you, but it's just not as simple as creating a calorie intake and then expecting to see this linear change. Like, there's always things that could be limiting our ability to see results. And I think it's the product of having the accountability and having a good coach to be able to help you acknowledge those things, of saying, are you finding that you're snacking more consistently? Or are you finding that your weekend behaviors are different than your weekday behaviors? Or is it like the bites and the licks and the tastes of the kids' food, that are truly adding up? Or is it that, we've been dieting for a while and now all of a sudden your physical activity has actually been reduced, and you're not walking as much and you're not exercising as much to offset some of that calorie balance? And you might not realize it. Or it might be, as your body's changed, you're 6 months down the road, you've lost a considerable amount of weight. Well, your metabolism has changed too. And that's going to lend itself to us needing to manipulate the variables in terms of your nutrition, your exercise, your supplementation, and even how your lifestyle factors into where you are in the dieting process. And again, going back to the initial conversation is, are we setting realistic expectations right now? Or are we trying to do things that, aren't realistic for you?
So you talk about giving people the choice in making their habits. I also think that you feel strongly in one direction over like restrictive dieting and limiting food choices. So how do you tie those together by giving people a choice, but also guiding them toward maybe some more restrictive dieting?
Hey, really quickly, if you're interested in hydrating yourself optimally and want to do it in an efficient and effective way, I created an Electrolyte Plus mix just for that. It's called Dr. Ashley's Electrolyte Plus, creative, I know. And it's crafted with essential electrolytes, vitamins, and minerals for maximum absorption. With patented forms of zinc and vitamin C, it supports immune and adrenal function. Plus, chromium picolinate regulates healthy blood sugar levels while helping to curb those cravings. Say goodbye to headaches and fatigue. Visit drashleywellness.com and use code Ashley10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah. So listen, at the end of the day, I think it's important for us to be really clear that's like, there's always sacrifices that we're going to need to make. And the laws of thermodynamics reign supreme, right? Is we need to create a caloric deficit if we're going to be able to lose weight. And there's a lot of different ways for us to do that. But the beautiful thing about choice is that, it's up to the client to determine, okay, well, what are the things that we're cutting back on? So that I think, what I've observed is it's so important for us to feel like we have some semblance of flexibility and freedom, right, in our diet, so to speak. I know that if I'm eating 1,800 calories or whatever it is, that I have the ability to have, some chocolate or have a slice of pizza or eat a hamburger here and there or have a beer, and I can still fit it in within that proverbial budget, right? Versus feeling like I'm relegated to this kind of one size fits all. You can't ever have any of these things. And I think that's when we get a lot of pushback. And I think that the conventional wisdom in the dieting sphere is that there needs to be this overt level of restriction. And it's my opinion that that's what causes people to continue this yo-yo dieting cycle, is because it's just not sustainable. Again, with most of us probably listening in the real world, with families, with, busy jobs and stressful lifestyles, and just the scope of food and diet culture as it stands is like, for most people, they're going to need to have that semblance of flexibility. And so that's where I think it's just so important that we infuse it. We understand, well, what are your kind of quote unquote worth it things? Like, what are the things that are worth it for you to expend to have those calories on, right? But like we discussed, Ashley, is the further we go down this road, the more we naturally start to gravitate towards the foods that make us feel really good. And the more we actually start to crowd out the foods that perhaps we fueled ourselves on before, the junk food, the highly processed, the hyperpalatable foods that are part of the standard American diet, and really getting much more towards the kind of the lists of foods that we would say these are the best foods to consume: whole, nutrient dense, high volume, high fiber, low calorie density foods. Because they make us feel great.
It's a tricky balance, because I also find that we have these trigger foods, these gateway foods that we really cannot eat in moderation. I really dislike the phrase, just eat everything in moderation. Eat a balanced.
Yeah, me too.
So it is finding that balance of not being restrictive, but also saying no to the foods that don't love us back. And some of those foods might be the worth it foods, and we think it's worth it, but it opens up the gateway to these foods where we just can't stop eating them, or it opens us up to foods that once we start, we can't stop?
Listen, we have to be honest with ourselves. I mean, and I think we have to give ourselves some grace. I mean, we're only human, and we know that the human brain thrives off of sugar and salt and fat. And, for me, I am a complete sucker for like really good chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
And I know for me, if they're in the house, I'm going to eat them. And so I make an adamant choice and make it very clear to my family members. It's like, listen, guys, these do not belong in the house. Now, obviously, I want to look out for them too, but it's like there's certain things that we just don't have in the house because I know I'll eat them. Now, it's totally fine if we go out and, I end up getting one or have something at a party or something like that. But you need to understand these things. And I think that's a beautiful part of, for lack of a better term, the dieting process. Like just establishing more nutritional awareness is knowing what are your kind of trigger foods, what are your buffer foods, what are the things that you probably, you need to stay away from because they're going to be problematic, like you alluded to. And what are the things that you can enjoy within reason, within your calorie budget, that you could potentially have a few bites of, again, enjoy, but not feel like you need to smash the whole thing and then go for the next piece.
Yeah. And there might be a piece around needing to change the mindset around restriction and deprivation, right? I think sometimes we feel we're restricted from something, but really, I think saying no to certain foods is actually a form of self-respect.
Yeah.
So like, what do you deserve? Do you deserve that chocolate chip cookie, or do you deserve feeling great in your body, not feeling like crap, fitting in your clothes? So I think sometimes when we have this mindset of I'm restricted, I'm deprived, it's one that it's kind of more a scarcity mindset, and we need to flip that around.
Yeah, I think that's my point with this whole autonomy conversation is anytime you put someone in this position of scarcity and restriction, there's going to be this overt level of survival pushback, if you will, like this psychological pushback of, if you tell me I can't have something, obviously it's like exactly what I want. It's like, don't think about chocolate cake, don't think about chocolate cake. Well, what are you going to think about? Obviously you're going to think about chocolate cake. So that's where, certainly having things where you're just okay saying no to. Like there's nothing wrong with that. No one's going to give, a recovering alcoholic a hard time for saying no to an alcoholic beverage. Like there's nothing wrong with you saying no to sweets or desserts or things that you potentially don't think are worth it. By that same token is if you also know that you have kind of unlimited level of restriction, but you also know how to be an owner over your decisions and take 100% responsibility over your food choices, right? Then you're going to be a lot more likely to kind of be the person that's like, crack with the chocolate cake. Like I got a taste and now I have to keep going because I already blew it. So why not, start again tomorrow? But anytime, I could have a couple bites, I'll factor it in. I enjoyed it. Maybe it was worth it. Maybe it wasn't. I'll use it as a learning opportunity one way or the other and move on with your day.
Yeah, there are, so beyond mindset and how we view certain food and the topics of restriction and deprivation, I think there are other factors in our life that can provoke stronger cravings and hunger that we have to keep at bay as well. So for example, stress. If we're super stressed, it's going to be a lot harder to say no to that gateway food. If that's the chocolate chip cookie, for me, it's Haagen-Dazs cookie dough ice cream. Like if I'm super stressed and I know, right? And it's in the house, I'm going to want to eat it. So will you talk about the impact of stress? What role does it play in weight loss and overall health? And then can you give us some tips on how to manage that?
It's funny. I'm like emphatically nodding my head too when you're saying that, because I think everyone can relate to this. And despite how motivated you are, right? Despite how prepared you are, like stress will throw a wrench in anyone's plan. Just the other night, I was giving a presentation or getting prepared to give a presentation, and my wife was making fun of me because every time I'm pretty stressed out, especially at night, and I'm working on something, I'll frequently take breaks and end up like raiding the pantry and
Mhm.
kind of going for whatever's there. And it's this, it's this kind of outlet that we're looking for to change our brain state, right? Because
Mhm.
again, sugar, salt, and fat, it lights up the brain. And I want to do anything to escape the stress that I'm feeling. And so one of the things that we have conversations with clients around under these circumstances, becoming hyper aware of the triggers to the behaviors that you want to change, right? And so the triggers for a lot of us are stressful circumstances. Now, whether that's just sitting at the computer working during the day, whether that's, like I said, preparing for a presentation, whether it's like when the kids get home from school and the energy and the chaos puts you in a position where you feel like you need to have a alcoholic beverage or eat something, that's going to light up the brain or whatever it is. The first step is to really just create some awareness and create some space between the trigger and the response. And so what we'll often discuss is just actually like journaling those things, of just keeping a notebook or even in the notepad on your phone, of just kind of like, what are the things that are overt triggers for you, the people that you hang around with, the circumstances that you find yourself in, the day-to-day situations that lend itself to you, the responses being, okay, I ate something, I drank something, I behaved in a way that made me feel good for a short period of time, but ultimately wasn't in line with my long-term objectives. And then getting very clear about what the outcomes of those behaviors are. Again, short-term benefit, long-term is not serving me well. Because again, once we're aware of these things, then we can actively make decisions to change these feedback loops. And so instead, that can be like, now that I know, right, every time I'm working late at night, I'm tired, I'm stressed, and I find myself in front of the cabinet, I'm going to say, okay, instead of migrating to the cabinet, I'm going to do 10 push-ups in my office or 10 body weight squats or take the dog for a quick loop around the block, right? Or just do 1 minute of deep breathing exercise and visualization, and then I'm going to get back to work. I'm going to avoid, whatever it is that I don't want to do. So as with everything, I think awareness is key, and giving ourselves the opportunity to understand our behaviors, and then making kind of a list of things that we know we can do instead that are going to be much more in line with the outcomes that we're looking for.
Yeah, replacing that habit with something else, right? I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm just not going to do that anymore. But the brain does not like to have a vacuum there. It's going to fill the void with something. So I love
Yeah.
the suggestion of having a list of alternative actions and changing our state from one where we're desiring those foods. Really, I think when we eat specific foods, we want to change our state. And we can change that state through movement or through, talking on the phone, getting out in
Yeah.
nature,
Getting creative.
listening to
Yeah.
music,
Right.
all these different, keeping our hands busy, knitting, crocheting,
Yeah. Exercise
doing a
100%.
crossword puzzle. Yeah, that's great. Well, so speaking of exercise, will you talk to the importance of muscle mass and why it's so important when it comes to weight loss?
Absolutely. So, muscle mass is an organ. So muscle in and of itself is one of the largest organs of the body. And muscle is very metabolically active tissue that plays a number of roles just in our day-to-day, biochemical processes, hormone functions, blood sugar regulation, energy production. And I think it's often an overlooked component of the weight loss process, to the degree that when we talk about weight loss, we often talk about, well, it's just calories in, calories out. And it's not wrong, right? But oftentimes people are looking for more than weight loss. They're also looking for body composition change. And so it stands to reason that, the more muscle mass we have to a degree, the better off we're going to be, certainly from a body composition standpoint, because we want to actually lose body fat. We don't just want to lose body weight, because when we lose weight, and I'm sure you've talked plenty about this, but when we are in a calorie deficit, depending how aggressive we're being, we're not just losing body fat. We're losing body fat, we're losing lean muscle tissue, we're losing bone mineral density, we're losing water. And so we might lose weight, but we might not actually be changing our body composition at all. And we might actually be doing detriment to our metabolism, to our hormonal function, to our ability to eat more food, to our energy production, all of the things that I said muscle mass is responsible for. And so instead I like to think about muscle as kind of a really big part of our metabolic engine. And if we understand that by having more muscle tissue, ultimately we usually can eat more food, we have more energy, we're going to be a lot more likely to lose body fat and improve body composition along the way, then it begs the question of, well, what do we need to be doing during the weight loss and dieting process to make sure that we are actually supporting that lean muscle tissue? Right? We need to make sure that we're doing some semblance of strength training and resistance training. We need to make sure that we're eating enough protein. And we also need to be cognizant of, again, how restrictive we're being with the dieting process.
When it comes to protein amounts, do you have a suggested, gram per pound body weight? What do you advise?
Yeah, I mean, we always it depends on where someone's starting from, but the objective is always to work up to anywhere from 0.75 to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight.
So that means if you weigh 250 pounds and your ideal healthy body weight is 180 pounds, you would say 0.75, for example, multiply 0.75 times that 180, and that would give you how many grams of protein to eat in a day.
Yeah, I think that's a good long-term objective.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, understanding that if someone's, goal is 180 pounds and they're only eating 80 grams of protein to start with, it's probably going to take them a little bit of time to learn how to develop the skills around their planning and their preparation and their food choices to be able to get to that 150 to 180-ish grams of protein per day. So we want to give them a bit of a runway there, but that certainly is the objective.
And then for strength training, because let's say we're getting adequate protein, we still have to overload the muscles to maintain or grow them. So how frequently would you advise someone strength train?
Minimum 2 days a week would be a really good starting point. Now, the cool thing about strength training is if you've done nothing ever with structured strength training, then you don't need a lot to create the stimulus for your body to adapt, which is cool because you can start with, just your body weight for exercises, which can be plenty for people, especially if you're overweight. And again, you don't have to do a ton of total volume. So it could just be one set of body weight squats and one set of modified push-ups and, one set of maybe some inverted rows or something like that a couple times a week, as long as we're factoring in what we call progressive overload. And that is simply that we are increasing the volume that we're using from one workout to the next. So if I do, one set of 20 body weight squats one week, maybe the next week I'm doing one set of 25. And then maybe next week I do 2 sets of 15, and we're increasing weight and or increasing reps or changing the tempo or adding more weight or whatever that looks like. Just a million different ways to get stronger and apply more stimulus so the body adapts.
Would you say that resistance training is the number one most important form of exercise as we're going through the process of dropping weight, or is there a different form that you would make a first priority?
That's actually a really good question. I think generally speaking, I would say resistance training is the biggest bang for your buck exercise, right? Or training modality that you can leverage that's going to improve all things down the road. However, I think the caveat to that, and as well as I do, is there's always a caveat. It's always nuanced. And I think it depends on where someone is starting, because I would say if someone I think that there's a lot of people that are just like deathly afraid to go into a gym or to know where to start when it comes to strength training, but maybe they're very motivated to get out and go start walking more, or maybe they're willing to go to the gym but just walk on the treadmill or ride the bike, but aren't ready to maybe dive into some of the resistance training exercises, in which case I would simply say start there. We can start to build a bigger aerobic base. We can get a lot of the benefits from the aerobic training, improving aerobic capacity before we start to leverage strength training, depending on where you are in kind of the weight loss, health, dieting process.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark Sisson just came out with a book and he talks about the importance, and I love Mark Sisson. I've had him on the show, and he talks about the importance of walking even over running. We just don't walk enough even. So my suggestion is always to start with a 30-minute brisk walk every day, 7 days a week. And once we get that baseline, then starting to overload the muscles through something. I don't know. What do you think about walking versus running?
I think walking is a much better modality than running for the vast majority of people because it is so much more sustainable. I really, and I agree with you 100%, is I think walking is like one of the most powerful fat loss tools. That's probably the most underappreciated. That's the lowest barrier to entry for people to get started with. And so I agree with you. If someone can get started with, just by doing a 30-minute walk, because we know very clearly that most people do not move enough throughout the day. And so if we can find ways to move more meaningfully throughout the day, we're going to reap the benefits from just an overall health standpoint, from a caloric expenditure standpoint, from a stress management standpoint. The list goes on for walking. It's just such a powerful tool that most people aren't strategically utilizing. So without question, starting there.
I'm included in this group that doesn't move enough, Ben.
It really is remarkable, Ashley. It's like, this is the vast majority of people. You go to a gym and you've got bodybuilders there. Like even, these men and women are not moving enough in meaningful ways. It's great that you're lean and strong, right? But there's an element of just energy expenditure and cardiovascular health that comes from moving. And I'm in this exact same boat. Like currently, I am just not moving enough either, to say nothing of like structured cardiovascular exercise. Because the American College of Sports Medicine recommendations, I think it's 150 minutes a week of low to moderate intensity exercise. And so, yeah, it's, 30 minutes a day, which 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, right? Which most people are just not doing.
Yeah, I had to get a treadmill under my desk so that when I'm in meetings all day, I can get some steps in. And my goal for 2025 is to get more steps in every day, because it's so easy just to sit and to work, and then the kids get home. And thankfully for them, I'm running up and down the stairs, getting them things,
Right. So
during bedtime.
I'm curious for you. You said your goal is to get more steps per day. Do you have an objective kind of metric that you're shooting for?
For me, I'm shooting for about 12,000 steps a day.
That's great.
But there are days where I'm at 4,000, 5,000. I'm literally sitting all day. Or if I'm shooting content or doing things like that, it's really hard. So I'm shooting content today, and I had to get up and go for a walk outside just to move my body. But I'm not going to hit my targets today unless I go for a long walk instead of be with the kids at night. And that's a hard decision to make. I usually choose the kids. I always choose the kids, actually.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I get it. And these are the real world conversations and real world decisions that people, that we're having with clients, that people are struggling with. And it takes very diligent planning and preparation to put ourselves in positions where we can be successful with these objectives. And it's not going to just magically happen, as you're alluding to. And so we, these are like, this is the real stuff of like, well, how are you? And the conversations we have with clients is like, well, show me your calendar, right? How are you planning out your day and your week in a way where you're going to be able to hit that step goal? And is it a realistic expectation for us? And if not, what do we need to change and or prioritize differently? Otherwise, we're just setting you up for failure. So that's where it's like, again, it's about so much more than just calories in, calories out, eat this, not that. What should I do in the gym? But like legitimately, how are you planning your day to be successful with the actions that you're committed to?
80% of weight loss comes from the mind, I think, mental, emotional, habit, behavior, and so many programs just like at the science of what, when, how much to eat. But if we don't look at the human aspect of it, I believe will drop some weight maybe. But then the body, if we don't let go of the emotions, change the habits, behaviors, it's just a matter of time until the weight matches that mindset again. So they definitely have to drop in tandem and shift in tandem, I would say. I would love for you to share with us, Ben, one piece of advice you wish that people understood about weight loss and long-term health. Like what's missing?
I think that the biggest missing factor is people giving themselves a long enough runway to truly learn how to essentially, right, change their identity, how to kind of learn how to be a better eater, be a better exerciser, become, right, that person that they're striving to be, in terms of it's never this right linear road. And so I think a lot of people get frustrated because they make a lot of progress initially, maybe over the first 6 months or maybe over a year. And then there's always bumps in the road. And by the way, there's always bumps in the road along the way. So I think people giving themselves enough grace, but also leveraging these roadblocks, these bumps, these detours as learning opportunities to continue to reinforce the changes that you're looking for, and be okay saying, you know, I'm not where I want to be, even if it's a year or 2 years down the road, but I'm a heck of a lot further than I was when I first started. And I think that it's not uncommon for us to feel like we're not doing enough. We're behind for some reason. Our results aren't as good as someone else that we see on social media or someone that we know. And so we're always making ourselves feel bad about our lack of progress, as opposed to acknowledging, like I said, just how far that we've come. And I think that's where really setting realistic expectations with someone and saying, listen, this is going to be a long journey. You've spent 30, 40, 50 years developing the habits that have put you here with us today. That you're not happy with what you see in the mirror. You're not happy with how you feel. You're not happy with how you're showing up for your family. And so can we just agree that this is going to take more than 6 months? It's probably going to take more than a year, especially for you to kind of become the type of person who's going to be able to maintain this significant weight loss in perpetuity. So that's really the conversation that I try and have, that I wish more of us practitioners would have with people and prospective clients and frankly, other coaches.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we're going to embrace a growth mindset, and we're going to focus on the gain rather than the gap. There's a book called, I think it was The Gain. Yeah, The Gap and the Gain. Yeah, I think as humans, we focus on the gap. Like, where am I not yet? Focusing on what's not working or what we haven't achieved or why we're not perfect, rather than all the huge things we've accomplished. That's the gain. And it's so easy to focus on the negative.
Well, I think as a business owner, you probably can resonate with that as well.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe these are all lessons for myself.
Yeah,
well,
totally.
Ben, where can people learn more about what you do, follow you, and continue to get these great insights?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is bodysystems.com, and you can follow us on social media at Body Systems Coaching. And then we have a popular podcast that I'd love to have you on, Ashley. It's the Smart Nutrition Made Simple show on all podcast platforms. So thank you for the conversation and the opportunity to share.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Ben, for coming on. And everyone, check everything out Ben's doing a lot of great work, and I'm excited to hear your comments and your feedback. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Okay, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed that discussion. I hope you were able to take away some actions that you can implement to create positive change in your own lives. If you are watching this on YouTube, please drop your comments, your thoughts, your feedback down below so I can read and get back to you. If you are listening to this on a podcast platform, please leave a review. I really do appreciate your feedback. All right, remember, you've got to step up to make a change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. I'll see you next time.